is that it's over $1 million this year in reduction in the education. If it's going to lower from 4 to 3.3, that's 0.7%. So I would say that's in the neighborhood of just over $500,000. And if you don't have that figure, that's okay, but I'm thinking it's far more than I thought it would be.
Okay, good.
It's a good question, Mr. Mayor, which we don't have it. We didn't calculate what the education, I'm sure Ms. Bugner might be able to get that for us.
That's okay. I
However-
don't need it right now. I'm surprised it reduced it this much.
It's actually, if you look at the average home owner, it's about a 5% reduction in their education taxes.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor, and Kathy, thank you for this slide, I guess. My ears perked up when Mr. Cribbs made this reference, I think, in his comments. So just so I'm absolutely certain I understand, our starting point today, and you used those words, for the average residential homeowner, taxpayer, would be a 3.3% increase.
Through the mayor to Councillor Oliver, that's correct.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's somewhat encouraging, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Councillor Sonnenberg, please.
Thank you. Might I ask what that works out to, dollars per household?
Through the mayor to Councillor Sonnenberg, it's down, we'll talk about that in a few more slides.
Oh, okay. Good, thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
The next table is just a history of the increased net tax levies that we've experienced since 2012. This is basically the dollars, again, that are required to run our business, to provide the same level of services as we have in the past. And you can see that the change from 2012, we had a percentage increase of 2%, all the way up to 4.8% in 2015, and the proposed change for 2018 at this point in time is 7%.
So this slide is a very good one. It actually answers a little bit of Councillor Black's question earlier on. Mr. Cribbs had an excellent answer. But with this slide, you can actually see what growth does to your taxes. So if you look at the growth column, which is at the very far to the right, and you look at, let's say, either 2017 or 2012, you'll see the growth was less than 1%. And then you look at the difference between the levy change and the average homeowner's increase. So for 2012, for example, that was the lowest growth in the last 7 years. And there's a very small difference between what the levy increase is and what it is for the average homeowner. Go all the way up to 2018, we're experiencing excellent growth, similar to 2013, and you can see it's a significant difference between what the levy change is versus the average homeowner. And that is basically, your levy is basically an apple pie, and the growth represents more people paying for that pie than the year before. So it's just a little bit less of a burden on the average homeowner when there is growth.
Thank you. Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Finance, I'm looking at this one. I wish I would have seen this one earlier. And it is a great report because it gives you the historicals. Now, I see here basically from 2015 to 2018, we've gone up almost $12 million on the levy. Some of that's growth, some of it's CVA, and some of it's an increase, I'm guessing here. Now, in 2015, were we also in a deficit levy, like 2016 when we were down $3 million?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, for the 2015 year end in the financial statements, we had approximately $526,000 as a deficit.
Okay, so basically we're looking around in 4 years a $15 million increase to the net tax levy, I'm guessing. Thank you.
Yes, you're correct, yes.
Now, moving into what are the budget drivers? As indicated, with the net levy requirement is just over $5.5 million, almost $5.6 million. A number of items are, this table outlines some high-level drivers, and if council may recall, back in 2016, there were decisions to use to phase in the impacts for a number of different items. The waste management costs were increasing, fire protection costs, and the leachate costs. That represents a 0.9% increase on the levy impact. There's also a number of items that are uncontrollable. There's more of a detail listed in the financial services report under tab 1, but it's basically including any base budget adjustments, CPI, negotiated contracts, etc., for a 3.5% increase on the levy. Then there's also the council and departmental controllable adjustments, 0.7%, and the requisitions from the request from the boards and agency total 0.3% increase, for a total proposed budget of $83.9 million, or 5.4%. This represents what staff feel is a business-as-usual budget. It's what we need to maintain the existing level of services. A requirement of 5.4% would be needed. The next area, as we talked about, there's a separate package today for new budget initiatives and council-approved initiatives. The council-approved initiatives are the adjustments to the budget approved by council that has taken place during 2017 and after the approved 2017 budget was approved through council. Some examples of those would be the legal services and there's a few other ones that council has already approved, but we do have the details in the supplemental package. The new budget, there are a number of new budget initiatives included in the package that council will be reviewing. They are the proposals for changes in levels of services. SLT has taken a lot of time, reviewed these new initiatives, ranked them, and there are a number of them that have been deferred also. They are also included in the package. Just so you know, the library one is not included within Norfolk County's package, and that's why we provided that one separately to you. This is a change this year through the process. After we've finished the presentation, that is the first item we're proposing to go into this year, is to review the council-approved initiatives and the new budget initiatives first. So hopefully that'll help streamline some questions when we begin to go through the agenda for each of the departmental budgets. The impact for the council-approved initiatives is $695,200, or 0.9% of an increase, and new budget initiatives total $566,000.7, for the proposed total Norfolk net levy requirement of 7%. And again, a little more details are included in the financial services budget under tab 1. The next slide is just to demonstrate that Section 290 of the Municipal Act requires municipalities to prepare balanced budgets. Notice expenses minus other revenues equals the tax levy. Just the expense side of it, in the proposed budget, expenses are increasing $8.87 million. The other revenues are increasing only by $3.3 million, which equates to our tax levy request of $5.57 million. The next pie chart it illustrates to council that how the expenditures, what percentage share the expenditures have on the total expenditures. You'll notice that salaries and benefits equate to 39% of all the total expenditures. The next areas are the transfer payments and grants, 28%. The transfer payments, for those who are unaware, the majority of that is for social services, client payouts, social housing payouts, etc. And then 20% is allocated to materials, supplies, and services. We only have 10% allocated to infrastructure funding, and the balances are, again, and only 1% of the expenditures allocated to capital. Those areas are very low compared to a number of different municipalities.
Councillor Brunton and over.
Kathy, can you give me a figure on how much uploading was done this year overall from the municipality to the province? What dollar value?
Excuse me.
I believe, just off the top of my head, I believe it's in the drivers, but I believe, for example, our funding has decreased by $332,000. And I believe, if I recall correctly, we'll have to double check it for you, I think it was approximately 90,000
Upload?
uploaded, yes.
That's it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kathy, this pie chart is a good one. It's revealing to me, and you've just touched on what has motivated my question, and that is the second largest piece of the pie, that transfer payments and grants. I think of that, when I hear those words, I think of that as a revenue source, not an expenditure. But you're saying roughly 28% of our total expenditure as a corporation in the operating budget relates to money being paid out to others, i.e. within the social services and health programs, et cetera, et cetera. Did I understand that correctly?
That's correct. And it also includes, I believe, the requests for the boards.
Okay, so we include our funding for policing under that piece of the pie. as
That's
an
correct.
example, which is 12 million.
Yes.
Okay, it makes more sense in that context then. Thank you.
You?
The other side of the house is, we've included a pie chart just to show you what the major sources of financing, or major sources of the revenue are. And the first one, of course, as you can see, is the tax levy. 49% of our revenue comes from the tax levy, 34% from federal and provincial grants, which are generally for the health and social services area and EMS and a number of different other areas. Other revenues are just minor revenues. You'll see the transfer from reserves and reserve funds is another source of revenue. And we do have some shared services with Haldeman County, and we recover 3% of some of the services that we provide within the health and social services. So this basically is just to demonstrate 49% of our revenues comes from the tax levy. So in the end, as a result of what we've done so far to date, we've calculated the average residential property. Last year, the average residential assessment was $220,250. For this year, it's $226,000. The change over 2017 for the assessment is $5,750. Overall, as you see, if you look to the right, the last column, overall, the average residential tax rate would increase 86.16 cents dollars for 2018.
So Kathy, if I may, you certainly answered to Councillor Sonnenberg and my curiosity as well. Previously, we know that the figures, what they were, but what the education portion now on the average residential, it's dropped it another $10 down to roughly $86 per year, correct?
That's correct.
Councillor Sonnenberg, anything further, sir?
Just to say that that's not even a meal for two at the keg. Thank you.
I won't get you an appetizer. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Kathy. If I understand this correct, if we look from the change from 2018, from 17 to 18, you're suggesting that if we pass this budget today, the cost would be $86.16 to our ratepayers. Am I correct?
No.
Which is roughly $7 per month. Am I also correct on that?
That's correct.
Thank you very much. That's a lot better than I thought when I started.
All of us, well, I don't speak for all of us, but certainly I'm thinking there may be a night's sleep at the end of this session yet. Mr. Johnson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know in previous budget meetings there's been questions on the average assessment that's being used, so I wanted to give some information on that ahead of time rather than waiting for the question. So the average assessment is calculated based on the criteria that MPAC has for a residential or an RT category. And So as Mr. Cribbs mentioned, that represents 80% of the burden, the tax burden of Norfolk County. The average, as shown on the screen, is 226,000. And so we took a look at how many properties are above and how many properties are below. So the properties that are greater than 226,000, first of all, the properties that we're looking at is approximately 23,000 properties, is the amount of properties. So the properties that are greater than 226,000, there's approximately 11,590 of them. The properties that are below is 11,280. So it's pretty almost smack in the middle. And if anyone's curious, there's 63 properties that are actually exactly 226,000.
Councillor Wells, then Brunton.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And Mr. Mayor, again, I want to go back to that slide that's on the board, because to me, that is the most important slide of it all. I spent a lot of time, as all of us did, on this budget, thinking about the great negative impacts it would have on our taxpayers. But if I read this correctly, I'm looking at $86.16 is the change from one year to the other. We've already established that represents about $7 per month. And if I divide that by 30, we're asking our ratepayers for an increase of 30 cents per day. Did I have that correct?
Through the mayor to Councillor Wells, you're correct.
And if that is the case, Mr. Mayor, 30 cents per day, I think that we haven't even started yet, but I think so far staff have done a good job.
Well, I know they've done a good job.
Thank you. What's that, Mike? Well, I think we should go through it and, spend a little time with it. I'm sure we can get it down a little further.
I'm getting the impression you didn't have breakfast this morning.
We haven't started yet, Mr. Mayor, but I want to congratulate, yes, there will be changes, and I will have some things to say. However, I do want to thank staff for all their efforts. They're bringing us a budget that I thought was not going to be quite as happy as I am right now.
Agreed. Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. My question is to James, I guess. The 11,000 above that 226 level, did you get an average or a mean, what the price was on them?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, there was 11,000 roughly homes above that price and 11,000 below that price. What I'm asking is, and that's not counting any of the commercial, residential, or commercial, industrial, whatever, but what was the average price for a home in the 11,000 above?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brunton, Sue Bugner put these numbers together, and she did calculate if you were to take the number that's in the middle, or the mode, I believe is the technical term for it, I think it was around 340,000. So if you were to start at zero and go all the way to the very top, the number that's smack in the middle is about 340 or 350,000. However, that doesn't represent the average.
And that's their assessed value.
Correct.
Correct. And so if I can ask this question, say there's a house in that 11,000 that's $450,000. Is it safe to say that their tax increase will double the $86? If their assessed value is twice of what the assessed value is at 226, is it safe to say that their cost for taxes will be double the 86? Does that make sense?
What I can say for sure is anybody above that will have a larger increase, and everybody below the 226,000 will have less of an increase. Whether it's exactly double or not, we'd have to calculate it. But
I would assume it'd be close. Is that correct?
through you, Mr. Mayor, that's a reasonable assumption.
Okay, thank you.
Further?
Okay. Just before I get to the last slide, I just want to thank Councillor Wells for bringing up the chart that's on the screen in front of you, just so that everyone knows that we'll continue to stay on the screen, this chart, and as we make revisions or adjustments, that will actually, we'll have the updated information as soon as possible on that screen. Also, on council's screen, their own screens on their desk, we'll have the information so that you can see as we're tracking the changes, what changes have been made to date and what they are and the impact for that. So, okay. So the last slide is just again, another bar chart, just showing how the total taxes of $2,729.63 is allocated amongst all the different services that Norfolk County provides. You'll see the roads operation and public works and police services are the top items where a lot of our taxes, your tax bill goes to. And generally, we put this in the tax bill, but it's basically based on a dollar. We're just trying to show you in a different, a percentage method of how your taxes are allocated.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I know, Mr. Mayor, this is in the tax bills in the little brochure that goes out. And I, for one, find this a very, very helpful and illuminating chart, if you like. And I think the property owners and the residents find as well. If you look at it, the fundamental services that people take for granted but realize are so important, roads, engineering, police, fire, EMS, those are all the biggies, so to speak. And I really am glad that you give us this particular chart, and it would be good to have over a year-to-year comparison almost for this, Kathy, because it may vary slightly from year to year. But bottom line is, it's an important one, and thank you for providing it.
That's the end of our presentation, so if you have any further questions, we'd be glad to answer them.
Councillor Wells, questions on this presentation at this point?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I was looking at the chart, which is on page 3, this chart here,
Yes.
and we have 2 pages of this in our council agenda. But you know, Mr. Mayor, when I looked at that at home, not at the council chamber, but when I looked at this at home, and I looked and it said that Norfolk, and comparing to these other municipalities, has the lowest cost. And I put that in my mind and said, I wonder where all these new people are coming from that move into, and I'll just use Port Dover, because my phone continually rings about how high our taxes are in Norfolk. And yet, Mr. Mayor, if this chart is correct, I'm not sure, I don't know where they're moving from, but they're not obviously moving from any of these areas. And many of the people that move in my area come from Toronto, and I'm sure their taxes are greater than those in Norfolk County. So I'm not sure when people come to Norfolk County how they believe that our taxes are so much higher than everywhere else. Because statistics, that's one thing about statistics, they don't lie, and it's here.
Well, if I can respond to that, I've wondered that myself. My answer to that would be, and it's only my theory, that many of the people are moving from large urban GTA area, Kitchener, London. They're not on here. And I think that in the case of, say, Toronto, you're not going to probably buy a home for $230,000. So I would think that people living, let's say, in Kitchener, that have somewhat comparable, their taxes may be lower than what ours are. I don't know. But I know if you just look at the residential, I think in some cases in areas like Kitchener and that, I'm not talking about GTA because you're not going to be able to compare apples with oranges there. So I think that they come to a more rural area and they're maybe paying a little bit less, let's say, I'm just going to use Kitchener as an example. Maybe Burlington, don't know, but it would be hard to sell a home in Toronto and move here and think you're going to compare apples to apples because you're going to pay 6 times that for a home in Toronto. So that's the only way I think we're seeing some of these people move from areas where they're in the city in a small residential unit might be a little bit less. And again, I don't have anything to back that up. Councillor Wells, that's the only answer I can give you.
Well, I thank you very much for that, but, you know, and I listened very carefully, but if you were buying a house in Toronto at $1 million, obviously your taxes would still, regardless of what the
Absolutely.
rate is, it would still have to be higher than in Norfolk
Absolutely.
County.
Absolutely, yes. Councillor Black, then Oliver?
Just on that one, but what those people that are moving from Toronto or the GTA area aren't telling you is when they sell their $1 million home, they can buy the equivalent here for 2/3 less and bank that 2/3. So, you know, they can buy a $300,000 home here, which is $1 million in Toronto, and they put in the bank over $600,000. Well, that's a lot of money to pay taxes.
Yeah, some have told me that, and Councillor Wells, I guess I'm going to keep this in my wallet, and the next time someone says their taxes are higher than where I came from the city, I'll say, exactly where are you from? Let's have a look. And again, I don't know. I don't have those numbers from the larger urban areas. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Still on the same page, I've always, as long as I've been around this table, I've put a lot of importance on these BMA data that we get from time to time, and I know not every year do we participate in the survey. I hope we are back in again for 2018. I don't recall if it's a budget item this year or not. That doesn't matter. But as you look across from left to right on this chart, to me, Mr. Mayor, the two that are most apple-to-apple comparators with us, and I say the most similar to us, of course, are Brant County and Haldimand County, which are our immediate neighbors, are single-tier government like us, and are largely rural-based municipalities like we are. And I would say we're somewhat substantially below even those two most comparable and most similar municipalities to us. I want Mr. Cribb's attention for a minute before I make my next comment, and that is, because I know he'll know this for sure. If you look at the city of Sarnia, for example, which is only 4 over from us, so still relatively low, but Sarnia is a municipality within the county of Lambton, I believe, and so residents of the city of Sarnia, in addition to services they get from Sarnia and pay taxes to Sarnia, they're receiving services from the county of Lambton, which I presume also has its own tax component. I don't know if anyone can answer this question or not, but using Sarnia as our example, does that bar in the bar graph reflect both the lower tier and the upper tier tax burden, or is it truly only the city of Sarnia tax burden? In which case, the difference is even more dramatic than it shows on the bar.
My information and belief on the methodology and how taxes work in a two-tier system is that it is always the lower tier that levies taxes, and then the upper tier effectively submits a bill to the lower tier for a percentage. And in Lambton, it's roughly 70-30, varies where you are, but so roughly 30 cents on the dollar are sent up to the upper tier for it to provide its services to the residents. So that should be 100% of the tax burden, a portion of which would go to the upper tier, and a portion of which, the majority of which would stay with the lower tier.
Thank you, David. And that is how it should be, of course. It should be a true comparison. But I guess my point remains, Mr. Mayor, it's well, again, going back to Brant and Haldimand, to me, those are the two that are most valuable to me, and as I think about what we should be doing.
Thank you, and I also want to just make a quick comment before we break here. I've had conversations over the last year since this chart has been available in comparison also with not only Brant but Haldimand. I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman that is quite having some difficulty believing that the same value of home in Haldimand, which is another neighbor, is about $1,000 more taxes on the same dwelling that would be here in Norfolk. They think these numbers are wrong. That can't be. It's almost 50% more, your taxes, if the same assessed property is compared. And I think people don't believe this chart. They really don't. Yeah, it's sort of, gee, all these years we've been wandering around saying our taxes are high in Norfolk. Yeah. Really? Compared to whom? Councillor Columbus?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I was watching the news the other night. I think it was Kitchener-Waterloo. They've settled their budget. I think it was 1.8%. And then they lumped in the rate, the water sewer into that for water, wastewater, and storm sewer, which was another 6.5% increase. And so I think a lot of these people that come from the city, there may be, I know they think that our water and wastewater rates are very high because they've had lower experiences in other places. But that's what happened in Kitchener-Waterloo was 6.5% increase on rate supported budget.
Thank you. Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. Just quickly, I know there were some questions earlier about Toronto taxes. They keep the rates artificially low and run huge deficits, but it is cheaper than here. A house that's worth $550,000, you'd be paying around $3,800 a year in taxes. Okay, for that same house in Norfolk County, with this increase, it would be $5,428. So it is considerably more, and we actually provide less services. We don't have the transits, but we don't take on massive deficits like they do. But one of the reasons I think it's important to keep our rates low is, A, for growth potential. We know growth affects our budget. And the second one is if you look at the income side of things, residents in Norfolk, we have lower income than a lot of these comparators. Like if you look to the right of that chart, you'll see Pickering, Aurora, Orangeville, Caledon, Newmarket. They're all close to the GTA. Most of those people likely work in the GTA and they're getting paid top dollar to do so, so it's more affordable for them. And housing is down, so they move out there and just continue to buy, and that drives the price up, which
So
makes the
Councillor Height, what
taxes.
you're saying is that an $800,000 assessed home in Norfolk would pay more taxes than an $800,000 in the GTA area, is that correct?
You'd pay considerably more
Here.
here.
Yeah, that's the only explanation I have
Yeah.
when you can compare apples to apples.
Right.
Any other comments before we break? When we come back at 10:45, if you will dig out the new initiatives, it's under tab 5. I see many have it out already. We will start through that. So we'll get back here at 10:45. Thank you. you find your seats, please, I would like to start in 1 minute. Okay, folks, I'd like to get started, please. If you will get out your information on council-approved and new budget initiatives, I am on page 1, and we will go through this, see if there are any questions, concerns, comments on these items. No, not tab 1. In the back of your binder, you will have under tab 5, kind of lodged in there, the package on the new initiatives. It'll be, if you haven't got it out, it's right at the back of your binder. It has the spiral binding on the top of it. Well, I'm on page 1, Councillor Brunton. These are the council approved initiatives, and then we'll get to them by the staff on page 8. You're quite right, they are on page 8 as well, but I think we can go through these quickly page by page. You sure can. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I've tried in looking through the whole budget, this county solicitor that we hired, and I guess, and I know the county manager indicated to us that it'd be coming out of one area and reducing the 500 or whatever down to one area in the budget, correct, somehow? Can you give me the math? That's all I want to know is, because every
Okay,
budget...
Councillor Brunton, I don't mean to be rude, but that is on page 8, and we will deal with that in just a moment. If you can just hold
all
your
right.
question.
That's fine, thank you.
I don't mean to be rude, it's actually on the top of page 9, and we'll get to the county manager right after councils. And most of these, I think, we're somewhat familiar with these, so I'm going to give you a moment to look through on page 1. We'll just do it page by page as we go through, and again, if I go too quickly, certainly we'll all go back if you find something that we'll go back. Councillor Walls.
Mr. Mayor, just a quick question. The second item, approved hiring of a chief administrative officer. Is that where we are? We still have the same old one, don't we? We didn't hire a new one, did we? Thank you.
Not yet. He missed the memo, he says. You can see the Eva Brooke Donnelly Museum. I know there's some health and social services items there, not to overlook them, but we're all familiar with the background on Eva Brooke coming into the operations of the county, and there's also the Norfolk County, I think it was a review, yes, review of our development services. That seems to be the big one there. I'm going to flip the page over again. Feel free to go back anytime if you feel hurried. I also will look at page 2, Councillor Wells.
When you say that's the big one, to me, the big one is the $473,500 and the hiring of 4 new staff. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
That's the big one, as I said.
Thank you.
Yep, yes, indeed. Councillor Columbus? Microphone, please, sir.
Greenbug Quants Dam project, it's been initiated, see there, in 2013, several years ago. Just wondered where that is and is it going to happen? And there is only a window that we can do that project, so perhaps Lee can comment.
Through the mayor to council, with respect to that project, the environmental assessment that was required to be completed was just completed in 2017, and so we're moving forward with the project. This is for an agreement that we have already signed, that council already has authorized to sign, and it had various payments at various terms, and this is one of the payments that we have to contribute at this time.
Thank you.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, just with regard to the recruitment of a full-time medical officer of health, I would like to say just a little bit about that. When I was on the region, we fought about this at the region. We've been fighting about it ever since, and finally the minister has said, you will do it, and we don't have any choice.
That's correct. Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the same item, and I'll direct this to Marlene, I think I was speaking with someone the other day about this, and that we've been mandated by the province to go ahead and cease sharing our MOH with Brant, and that there will be levy impacts. Marlene, will the province share with us the cost? In other words, if we're showing a net extra cost to our levy of $97,000, is that shared with the province, or is this 100% cost to the two counties, not just ours? No, yeah, ours and Haldeman, of course.
So through the chair to Councillor Oliver, we did, as of last week, receive a letter from the minister advising staff to submit a grant to offset some of those costs. And you'll see in a subsequent report that's coming in camera on February the 6th that it articulates that, and we will be putting forth some requests for funding to offset that.
Thank you, and that's good news. But will that become then part of our base funding for the health unit, et cetera?
Through the chair to Councillor Oliver, yes, it will.
Okay.
And it's already been incorporated into the budget.
Okay.
And it will be part of the base funding and has been removed from services.
All right, so this is a true levy impact, if you like, then.
Through the chair, that is correct at this
Okay.
point in time.
Thank you.
Marlene, I know that these 4 items on page 2 at the bottom, from the MOH down to the part-time tobacco, are indeed Board of Health. They are also under the Board of Health tab at the very end of this package. Do you want to leave it till we deal with the Board of Health later?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That would be preferred.
Yes,
if there's any
I
follow-up
agree.
questions, then Ms. Taylor will be here to assist with any of those
We
answers.
will leave the end of the bottom of page 2 until we deal with the Board of Health, and I have noted that on my agenda, so I won't miss that, and I know